everyone, this is Miss Siddiqui here. In this video, I'm going to talk about the playwright and author Arthur Miller, who's one of the greatest writers of the 20th century and very known in the world of American literature. So Arthur Miller was born Arthur Asher Miller. And in addition to being a playwright, he was also an essayist, and his career lasted over 61 years, and he has been prominent both in the literature world and the cinema world. Many of his plays and works were turned into Broadway shows and into feature films. So Arthur wrote a wide variety of plays, including celebrated plays such as The Crucible, which we're going to read, A View from the Bridge, All My Sons, and Death of a Salesman, all of which are studied and performed worldwide. So during his career, Arthur Miller was really in the public eye a lot, mostly because he had a very celebrity-like status for his writing and his cinema, but also hugely for refusing to give evidence against others to the House Un-American Activities Committee, or HUCA, which was a Senate committee which basically tried to find out who the communists in American society were. And we're going to talk a bit more about that background and McCarthyism in the next couple videos. So Arthur Miller wrote The Crucible to attack the anti-communist witch hunts of the 1950s led by Senator McCarthy. Now you might be saying, well, The Crucible takes place during the Salem witch trials. How are those related? Well, if you think about the persecution of communists and the persecution of witches in Salem in the 1600s, there are a lot of overlaps in terms of the fear in society, and the way that those witches were being pursued was completely unfair to those individuals. So Arthur Miller was trying to critique what was happening in the era through talking about a related era, which really we consider to be kind of a bizarre time in American history where people really thought witches existed and killed many innocent people as a result. So Arthur Miller was recognized for his work, The Death of a Salesman, with the Pulitzer Prize in 1949, and he also, The Death of a Salesman also won a Tony Award for Best Musical. And Arthur Miller was also very well known for having been married to Marilyn Monroe, though it was for a very short time. And at the time of his death, Miller was considered one of the greatest American playwrights. He was famous and successful throughout his entire career. So, Arthur Miller, early life. Miller was born in New York City as a moderately affluent Jewish American in 1915. In spite of his father's business failure in the Wall Street crash in 1929, which led to the Great Depression, he still managed to graduate during the Depression era from the University of Michigan, where he began playwriting. In 1940, he married his college sweetheart, Mary Slattery, who was the Catholic daughter of an insurance salesman. However, that marriage ended in 1956, in June of that year, and then later that month, Miller married Marilyn Monroe, and Monroe and Miller had known each other for about 5 years at that time, and they actually had had a brief affair during Miller's first marriage and had remained in contact. So it wasn't too surprising that he would have married Marilyn Monroe in 1956 also, but it was very sudden and something that the media talked about a lot. So in 1961, which is pretty soon after the marriage began, the pair divorced, and then a year later, Marilyn Monroe, who I'm sure you're all familiar with, died of an apparent drug overdose the year that she divorced Miller. And then in 1962, Miller married Inge Morath in February, And actually, that was his longest marriage. It lasted 40 years until his wife passed. So Miller had 3 marriages in his life. And then in 2004, Miller took on another partner, Agnes Barley, and they lived together at his farm in Connecticut. And they stated that they were intended to marry, but they never were married. So some of the major works that you should know by Arthur Miller are All My Sons, Death of a Salesman, The Crucible, A View from the Bridge, The Misfits, After the Fall, The Archbishop's Ceiling. So, greatest takeaway is that Miller's career as a writer spanned over 7 decades, so he saw multiple different time periods in the 20th century. And the 20th century is really the time in American history where there was a lot of social evolution in terms of how were we improving as a society in terms of the rights that individuals had, right? We witnessed women's rights, the rights of African Americans, and so Miller really was an author that produced a lot of writing that was a social commentary on the changing face of America in the 20th century. And he was considered one of the greatest dramatists, so he was mostly known as a playwright, and he was among those like Samuel Beckett, Jean-Paul Sartre, and Tennessee Williams, who are all also famous American playwrights. So Miller died at his home in Roxbury of congestive heart failure in 2005, which is not that long ago, about 10 years, and that was the 56th anniversary of the Broadway debut of Death of a Salesman, and Miller died at age 89 surrounded by family. Thanks for watching!